think today is a day for celebration. I say that, and I say that quite enthusiastically, because for the first time in history, St. Martin has presented a balanced budget for 2017 according to the stipulations in the law. That budget has been presented to the Council of Ministers, and it was passed yesterday by the Council of Ministers, so everybody should give themselves a big round of applause. This message will be going out to, of course, all of the other countries in the kingdom, and it will again show that St. Martin is on the right path, and St. Martin can do and is prepared to do the right things. Sending a message that we are organized and able to meet the requirements of the law is important, because these requirements are meant to show that you're busy with good governance, show that you're in control of the management of your finances, and show that you have a path that you're following to be able to continue on a path to get to complete financial health. I want to thank from this point all of the people in my department who have been working for the past couple of months vigorously in reaching this point. And it's not an easy task, but we accomplish it. And today, you, I, everybody else could be proud of this fact. I would also like to mention that yesterday in the Council of Ministers, a decision was taken going forward that all appointees to all government corporations, foundations, will not take place without the consent and approval of the Council of Ministers. And insofar as structures, which is the case, has been created in the past to sort of put the government aside and have companies as shareholders making decisions to appoint people in government-owned companies or in foundations, that those structures, according to the decision taken by the Council of Ministers, will be dismantled going forward, and all ministers have been requested not to lend their cooperation to any appointment of anyone in government-owned companies or foundations without the consent of the Council of Ministers. Finally, I would like to mention that on Thursday night, I will be giving a lecture, or at least I'll have a town hall meeting that I promised that I would do to share information with the public on information gathered when I attended the UN conference in Mexico City, to share with the public all of the trends that are going on internationally and the effect those trends are having on our economic development. And I'm extending an invitation to everyone to please come out to attend that meeting and obtain the information that will help you to understand policy decisions that government has to take. Thank you very much.
First off, I'd like to address some of the discussions that have been ongoing about the hospital. First of all, as you all know, I subscribe to the principles of transparency and open government. And while I receive phone calls and letters and emails and about concern about all of the melee that's happening in the newspapers and online, actually, I welcome the discussion. I welcome the debate. This is all part of government being open. In the end result will be that the people will be knowledgeable about the projects and the way the projects have been approached. It means the people will get the right hospital for the island, and also for the right price. So I welcome the discussions, I welcome the openness, and to be honest, these are conversations that, for example, when there were negotiations with another company prior to us coming in, prior to this government coming in, there was no debate. There was no discussion about what was in the terms of reference or not in the terms of reference, and what was in the business plan or not, and how it was going to be financed, because all of this was opaque. No one could see it. No one could talk about it. So only because we are open, only because we've taken the time to document everything, to put everything on paper, that there is the possibility of having that discussion. And so I welcome the discussion. I have nothing to hide. Some of the comments that have been made, again, I don't have any problem to talk about the topics, about the issues, but I do see that things are degrading to a level that I believe is distasteful and inappropriate. But I understand. People feel their way of life, politics as usual, perhaps business interests being challenged, being threatened. And that's when people start to degrade and start to destroy my political signs. They start to write distasteful and personal attacks. And for example, when it was written that I should wait and speak to the federal detectives, wait for them to come and question me. No problem. I called the federal detectives myself. I said, look, here's my personal cell number. Here's where I live. Come. They said, Minister, I don't know what you're talking about. We got nothing to talk to you about. So, you know, if you're going to have these discussions, keep it to a professional level. I don't have any problem talking about the issues. I don't have any problem talking about what's in the best interest of the country. One point that's been discussed is, oh, look, the new hospital, it doesn't have a dialysis center. The hospital has a dialysis center now. The hospital, one of their most profitable departments, is their dialysis center. Do you really believe that when we went to design a new hospital, we said, oops, and forgot to put in the dialysis center? Absolutely not. The fact is, the current dialysis center does not satisfy the needs of the population now. So, we cannot wait 3 years for the hospital to be completed in order to address the needs of the population today. There should be a photograph online on the TV. You could see it. The building in red is a section that was reserved for the dialysis department. And the idea, or the discussion, was that we would build the dialysis department as a separate venture immediately or soon, without waiting for the completion of the hospital, because that's what the needs of the population are. Therefore, when the contractors or the developers were asked to make a proposal for the new hospital, it did not include the dialysis center because it needed to be addressed earlier. Same thing, if somebody wants to build a house, they go to a contractor, they say, look, I'm going to put the kitchen in myself. So what do? They take the kitchen out of their contract to build the house. There's nothing sinister here. Special purpose company. From the beginning, we've spoken about how there's multiple possibilities for financing for the construction of the hospital. So, in order to be as flexible as possible, SZV has proposed in the business plan to set up a special purpose vehicle, or SPV. So in case government has to take over the project, it could easily take over the shares of the SPV from SZV, so to automatically take over the design, build, and maintain contract and the loan agreements with SZV. So, sorry, Minister of Finance, but if SZV takes over the hospital, buys the hospital, SZV has to pay transfer tax. Our hope, the best thing for the country, is that we can get financing for the hospital via the Dutch government, because it's low interest rates and it's over a much longer period of time. Our estimates are it would save between $5 to $6 million a year in operational costs for the hospital. So our best bet, the best thing for the country, is to finance the hospital via the Dutch government. In which case, one of the conditions for that would be that the government would have to own the hospital. So, instead of paying transfer tax again, sorry, Minister, we would transfer the company to the government thereby avoiding double taxation on the transfer tax. This is normal business practice, nothing sinister. My family doesn't have shares in any company that's going to own the hospital. I have no interest in the business of the hospital. There's no conflicts of interest. I'm not building the hospital. My wife's not building the hospital. People need to stop with nonsense. People need to understand that when you make allegations, unfounded allegations, really, that's distasteful. Two other announcements I have. Yesterday, hard work from the ministry. We finally have presented a proposal for national health insurance legislation that was sent to the Council of Ministers. Council of Ministers have agreed that that legislation, that draft legislation, could begin its consultative process. So that means that we will be going out to different stakeholders. That's all different levels in the community. If someone has an interest in having a discussion about it, contact the ministry, because we are open to the discussions. Call the ministry. We're happy to discuss it with you, because in the end, we want this to be win-win for everybody. The idea with national health insurance is that we look at covering all the people on the island, but we need to make sure it's done in a financially reasonable manner. The last topic that I'd like to speak about, something that I'm proud of, something that we haven't really spoken about for much during my time in office. The Labor Tripartite Committee yesterday signed a consensus document. So we've been working diligently. The Tripartite Committee consists of representatives from the business community, from the labor unions, and from government. And we've been in discussions about finding an agreement on how to address the abuse of the 6-month contracts or short-term contracts, and attached to that discussions about far-reaching concepts for labor reform. I'm extremely proud of the end result. I think that the product is a game changer for the country. I think it's something that will, again, reignite our economy and also give stability to the workers in St. Martin and put upward pressure on salaries. Equally significant is the process. It's a process, I've been involved in the tripartite in other incarnations when I was president of SHTA, so from the business representative side. And I've seen how the committee's evolved, how the dialogue has been open, how there's a sense of trust, how there's a unified vision in terms of what we want to accomplish. And I'm proud to say we had 100% unanimous consensus on the consensus document. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Took note of your hospital transparency and good governance. Can you tell us, based on your tender documents and SZV website, that states the contract would have been signed either on the 30th or the 31st, which is today. Are we signing that contract with INZO or not?
No.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
Discussions are not complete as of yet. It's not ready to sign.
If I may go further into the same situation, the same question, do you know who is going to be the local contractor working with INZO? Have they come up to that part where they're discussing who are they going to contract locally to assist in building the hospital?
I just told you, no contract has been signed. The recommendation to INSO is that they would do a public tender process on the subcontracting process for the hospital as well. Again, we subscribe to the principles of open government and transparency through all levels of the project. And in order to avoid any accusations of some insider trading, inside deals, hush-hush money, no, nothing. As a matter of fact, I believe that's exactly the reason that people are attacking the hospital, is because I think that there's so much money at stake to not have this contract finalized, and that other people can jump in on the contract. Otherwise, why are people visiting hospitals now? What's the incentive to go visit another hospital now? So, my recommendation to INSO is that you do a public tender process for all aspects of the project.
Yes, you have one more question.
Okay, Minister Gibson, your budget that you said was approved by the Council of Ministers yesterday, can you give us a ceiling of that budget?
The ceiling is an average between what the three last budgets has been, and the amount comes up to about 450 million guilders.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you for your questions in the first round, Ms. Shaw. We now go over to Ms. Alita.
Thank you, Rodney. Good morning, Ministers. Minister Gibson, on the budget, you mentioned, I believe, 2 press briefings ago that your aim was not to cut any of the subsidies of the foundations and organizations that are funded by government. Have you achieved that goal?
100% has been achieved. There are no subsidies being cut. It's being restored to the level it was before.
On your second topic about no appointees to government foundations and companies, can you give an idea, give the background of that decision? Why did the Council of Ministers come to that decision?
Because we have seen a tendency of people being appointed to government boards of foundations as well as government-owned companies that the Council of Ministers sit back and have no say in. What has happened in the past with previous governments, for some obscure reason, that government-owned companies of which the government was a shareholder, they manage with the consent of previous governments to form another company, put it in between the shareholder as a holding company, and then the operating company. And then the holding company becomes the decision maker as to who's going to become or who's going to be appointed or elected to boards of the operating company. And the shareholder sits back and twiddles its thumb and really has no say. That situation, when it comes down to problems that occur, it is the government, the shareholder, who is answerable to the public for those appointments in government-owned companies and foundations. From that point of view, those appointments should not take place since the government is responsible for those appointees without the consent of the Council of Ministers. This needs to stop. And the decision taken by the Council of Ministers is exactly that going forward, those structures will be dismantled. That's the instruction. To be able to put government in a position that its government has the last say, the Council of Ministers would have the last say of appointees to foundations and government-owned corporations.
How does then the Corporate Governance Council fit in this entire structure?
It has no effect on the Corporate Government Council because whoever government wants to appoint still have to go through, it's the law, the same procedure with the Corporate Governance Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. We now go over to Andrew.
Yes. Good morning, Minister Jacobs. One question. The school bus policy for the school buses, any update on that?
No update. We're scheduled to have a meeting with the association later today. Other than that.
Any more questions? We now go over to the second round. Ms. Shaw.
Minister Lee, have you heard about the ATS? It's a foundation established, and the address used is SZV. The people that are working on this foundation at SZV, do you know anything about it? And if you know, can you give us some information on that?
At this stage, I think you're better to ask SZV. I'm not that familiar. I wouldn't want to misspeak about them. I know briefly about ATS, but I think that's a question that's more appropriate for SZV.
Perhaps I could elucidate this question so that any aura of malfeasance is put to rest. ATS or AST
Yes.
is a foundation formed to assist SZV, from the information available to me, in its collection of outstanding premiums that are in arrear, that has to be collected for by SZV. In order to accomplish this, SZV has entered into a arrangement, a contract with this foundation to be able to improve their collections of outstanding SZV premiums. If they have an office at the SSB building, it was to accommodate them and to be closer to them in exchanging information to collect more efficiently. And my information is that the program that they're executing is quite successful and is contributing immensely to eliminating the backlog and delinquency payments that are at SZV.
Minister, if I could add to that, I understand that their collections are up over 20% already on their receivables, so they are doing well.
Okay, before you continue, Ms. Shaw, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of our Prime Minister, the Honorable William Marlin, who is here for questions also.
Thank you, Minister Gibson, and thank you, Minister Lee, for adding that last part, because at least you know a little bit about the ATS. Prime Minister Marlin, good morning, and thank you for being here. I have two questions for you, and I'll pose the first one. The Corporate Governance Council was asked to make their seats available. Members of the coalition, the current coalition, is attacking that they don't know about it and that you took, I don't know what kind of decision. Would you care to explain your decision on asking the Corporate Governance Council to make their seats available? I would also ask you to expound a little bit on the letter you received from them regarding the appointment of the CEO of TALEM.
Good morning, viewers and listeners. Bibi, thanks for the question. At this point in time, there is not, there is not. I'm meeting with the Corporate Governance Council this week, and after that meeting, I will further have a public discussion rather, if it's necessary then, on the way forward and what has led to where we are at. There are those who, are quick to run to the media. We are in an election year, and everybody wants to get bragging points over the other one. Everybody wants to try and throw one under the bus. Everybody wants to, every time there is a cigarette on the pond fill that somebody dropped, somebody screams that the dump is on fire. The Corporate Governance Council had requested additional information. When I sent, on behalf of the government, I sent, let me back up a bit. For 7 years, the position at TALEM was vacant. Just like for 8 years, the government building was unoccupied, was called by me the largest pigeon coop in the world. For 7 years, there was a vacancy for the CEO at TALEM. Why previous governments did not fill the position, I do not know. I was not the shareholder representative of TALEM, neither was I in the government for more than the 1 year in 2012. I've been told when I got in by the supervisory board that, hey, there's a vacancy, we need to fill it. TALEM is going through important discussions, important changes. There have been talks about merging or selling shares of TALEM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to have a full management team. So the board went out and started the process to appoint someone. 2 members were submitted to the government, and for the government to make a choice of one of them, which we did, and a name was sent on for the screening. I got a letter back from them saying we can't move on with the screening, we need the second name as well. I was on my way out, I had to travel, I think it was, I said, well, I won't have any argument with them, send them the information in order not to have any delay. When I got the letter back from them, I gave it my interpretation and I gave it my reaction. They have sent back a reply stating that there must be a misunderstanding and therefore they are requesting an urgent meeting for us to clear up the matter. It is just a few days before that I have had meetings. Well, a few weeks ago, I've had meetings with the Corporate Governance Council because one of the problems that they have had also, for ever since they were established, they have not been getting their monies to run the Corporate Governance Council as prescribed by law. The funding for the Corporate Governance Council has to come from government-owned companies. We had SOAB do a study among the government companies to see which of the companies should come up with the funding and what the amount for each company would be. So there was a division key that was advised by the SOAB, and a certain amount of contribution among the 4 bigger companies, which was TLM, Airport, Harbor, and GBE. I've met with 3 of them. I've invited all of them. TLM did not show up, and we don't know why. But I've met with 3 of the companies to explain to them why and whatnot. In the meantime, the Corporate Governance Council had asked for, I think it was 25 or 50,000 guilders, I think it was 25,000 guilders, because if they get that, then at least they can pay certain things to keep the office operational until the structural things go into place. So there was no bad relationship, if I should say, between the Corporate Governance Council and for sure not my person. Whether I gave their letter a wrong interpretation or not, because one of the things that I think that whenever you have a legal angle to things, if you give 5 lawyers a legal document to read, you end up with 5 or 6 different interpretations to it. So that meeting will be held most likely this week. I've discussed the issue briefly with the chairman, Mr. Perry Wilson, and he said, no, Mr. Prime Minister, I think you misread our letter, or we have misread yours, but we are to meet. So I am not, I'm not the kind of guy who goes out there contrary to what others sometimes do. They run to the media and say, you know, this has happened, or we send this letter, we hand in this letter today. I, just like with screening of candidates, I have never said which candidate it is that is up for screening, because I think that if somebody fails the screening, then you move on with the other one. But the public, whether the public wants to know or it's the media, likes to speculate on who ministers will be or who directors would be or whoever would be, that's for their account. So rather than going into any further discussion on it and create more unnecessary bad blood, I am meeting with the Corporate Governance Council this week, and once we've had our discussions and both parties get the opportunity to clarify whatever misunderstanding there would be, we move forward from there.
All right, Prime Minister, today we do not have the Minister of Justice, but a sad day for St. Martin. A prisoner, while in Point Brown's prison, was shot to death. As Prime Minister of this country, looking towards security, especially at the House of Detention, do you plan to meet with the Prime Minister, with the Minister of Justice, or even the prison management to find out what's going on there?
One of the one of the things to begin with, I've had no official word yet. In driving, coming to the office, I was told by the head of security at government that there's a shooting taking place right now, and the A-team is heading towards the prison because someone was supposedly shot and someone was supposedly shot to death. There are speculations about who the person can be or could be or should be. There's no confirmation. So at this point in time, I do not want to add to the rumors. I don't want to pretend to have first-hand information. I do not. I called the prison before I came here. That was one of the reasons why I was late, and did not get an answer. So it's clear. I mean, obviously something is going on, but who, what, when, nobody knows. One of the things that the Minister of Justice recently did was bring a proposal to the Council of Ministers to have the dog unit started up at the prison. We've had the inauguration of the unit down at the new facility in Orange Grove, and about a week after, the minister came here with a broad smile and said the dogs just performed their first catch. And it was a search, a random search at the prison, and they found cellular phones. So, he was happy to see that the dog brigade was yielding positive results. How a firearm got into the prison, it's always a mystery. How cell phones get in, how firearms get in, how whatever it is gets in. It is reason for concern. I'm sure the Minister of Justice may be up there right now getting a first-hand information on it, so I would rather leave it up to him to further address. Not that I'm saying I'm staying out of it. I'm sure it has the concern of every member of the Council of Ministers, but also every citizen should be concerned over such a development. Because the last place somebody should be safe, should be in the house of detention in prison. There are even cases where people, when they feel threatened on the outside, they go and make sure they get arrested, or they report to the police and plead guilty for whatever little misdemeanor, so that they are safe on the inside. So if someone is not safe even in prison, and it is not the first time that we've had stabbings, it's not the first time that we've had shootings, so this is not something that happened for the first time. It's just like the dump is on fire. So we as soon as there is information, I'm sure that will be shared, but it definitely, if so, has the concern not only of myself, but I'm sure of every member of the Council of Ministers.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Marlin.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. You now go over to, no questions, right? Andrew?
For the Prime Minister, the Corporate Governance Council, again, did you send a letter to them asking them to resign?
I am sure you were playing on your phone and wasn't following my response.
It's actually writing notes.
Rewind the tape and you would hear my answer on what I answered to the questions posed by Mrs. Bibi Shah. So next time, don't play on your phone.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Lee.
There's one comment I forgot to make in my opening address, and that's regarding the AOV. Article 25 of the National Ordinance on AOV was written in the 1960s, which states that a decree should be established in which regulations are stipulated in connection with the investment of monies of the AOV. Although this article was not executed by the Antillean government nor the St. Martin government after 10-10-10, in reality, investments have always been made using the AOV fund. Not to invest the money would have been irresponsible, because it means that the principal would have been reduced by inflation and would have eaten the value of the fund. In June 2013, the SZV board had established investment guidelines concerning their various funds, which at least gives some direction regarding their investment policy. Any final decisions regarding investments in the hospital will be made with the full knowledge and consent of the investment committee. And I want to remind the public as well that there's a strong incentive for SZV to invest in the hospital. Number one, investing money into our local economy is good for our economy. SZV would get a proper rate of return. In addition to that, a new hospital will help to bring down the operational expenses for SZV itself. So the investment, in our opinion, is a sound and wise investment, and as I mentioned, will be done following all proper procedures.